You guys can see my screen. All right. Cool. What's going on here? Okay. So can you guys see my screen? Okay. Oh, I think I need one moment. What's going on here? Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we can see, but it's not in the presentation mode.
What about now? Yeah.
Not changing it.
But I think I've already set the full screen. Is it working now?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. What's Oh, can I just terminate this sharing and restart it again?
Sure.
So. What about now?
Yeah. It's not in the presentation mode. You can change it to
Not the full screen yet.
no.
Yeah. Okay, I'm working on it. I don't know what's going on, but it's a bit slow. It looks like the computer is freezed, I guess, a little bit. That's a bit weird.
Or you can send the presentation to me. Well, you can still change it. I think it's fine.
Well, what's hang on. I think that's weird. Why can't use the presentation mode? What about now? Is working? Yeah.
Maybe if you switch off the share screen and then you give the
Yeah.
full screen to your presentation and then you switch on again the share screen, choosing
Okay,
the full
cool.
mode.
So
It's very tricky all the time.
yeah, I don't know, it's a bit weird.
So go do your full screen and then you switch on again the share
I
screen in the
tried,
Zoom.
but if I use the full screen, then I can't
You cannot see us.
yeah, I cannot use the sharing screen function. So it's a bit weird. Try
But
it again.
if you click in your Windows key in your keyboard, you will see the panel.
Okay, so there's some what about now?
It's okay. I think we can see that
Yeah.
way. It's just a little bit smaller, but it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
all right. So sorry for the for waiting. Okay. So tonight I'm gonna this webinar I'm gonna discuss whether the China is making the rand gap theory untrue, and I'm going to use some empirical evidence from the city called Nanjing. And there are 4 parts in my presentation. And first, I'm going to make some kind of like introduction, and then to present how to make the rand gap theory untrue, and I will discuss China's attempts and draw a conclusion. Well, according to the rand gap theory, so the larger the rand gap is, the more possible the parcel or the property will be gentrified. But this theory does not predict the wheres and the whens of gentrification. The more important thing the rand gap theory can do is it can reveal the uneven development of capitalism, that is the accumulation by disposition. And in this process, the government and developers explore the rand gap while the disadvantaged, displaced, and marginalized. And recently, in recent years, the government in a lot of countries, they just adjusted the intensity and modalities of gentrification in response to the macroeconomic conditions, popular grievance, and changing political forces. And
we can only, sorry to interrupt, we only see the first slide.
oh yeah, I'm sorry. So what about this? I'm gonna send this slides to Yunpeng, and can you share it?
Sure. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry for interruption. I'm gonna do this immediately. Just wait a moment. I'm gonna use a WeChat. As just wait a moment. Okay, I've already sent it to you. Would you please share?
It's transferring.
Okay. Will it take a long time?
Looks like it, yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
What if I'm gonna send it an email?
Yeah, that could also work.
So can you give me an email address so I can send it to you immediately?
Yeah.
Oh, got it. Oh, that's weird. I can't add the attachment. That's weird. What's going on?
I got the file from WeChat.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So can you share now?
Yeah, give me a second. Let me check. Put on share screen. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Cool. So can you just we go directly to the third slide, I guess. Maybe next one. Okay, so I'm gonna start from here. Okay, I'm sorry for the interruption. Well, in recent years, the government in a lot of countries adjusted the intensity and modalities of the gentrification in response to the the socioeconomic conditions and the public outcry and changing political forces. And for the Chinese government has changed its modus operandi too, from the coercion and violence to flexible statecraft and the civic engagement, heritage conservation, and the social equity were emphasized in the processes of gentrification. Next slide, please. And according to our observation, the state interventions potentially stifle the spread of the tentacles of predatory capital in China. So here comes our research question. So can a strong government like the Chinese government make the rand gap theory untrue? When we saying make rand gap theory untrue, we didn't mean to empirically validate the theory, but to discuss how to eliminate those mechanisms which serve to generate the theory and to remove the rand gap inequality. Next slide, please. So actually in 2017, Eric Clark published a paper, and he proposed 4 overlapping courses of actions to make the rand gap theory untrue. The first is decommodification, and that is the right to place must override the right to extract the rand, and the decommodification can resist the further expansion and speculation of the market in organizing the space. Next slide, please. And the second is to redress the socioeconomic inequality. Well, previous research found that the different classes with different socioeconomic status, there has different tolerance to the change or ramifications of the gentrification. And for the low-income families, they were more vulnerable and more susceptible than the owners. So we need to take measures to reduce the capability gap among affected residents. So a more equal distribution of wealth and power on the societal level, more meaningful participation in land use planning and decision making in the process of gentrification is needed. Next slide, please. And the third measure is to restore the centrality of the use value in ordering land uses. Well, the rand gap actually is the disparity between actual rent and the potential rent. And essentially, the actual rent is the use value of the land and housing for the extent users. And this part is always devalued by the interest of developers and investors. And the potential rent on the other side is the exchange value of the highest and best use after redevelopment. And when we say restore the centrality, that means we need to put the right to stay on the top of the agenda of the government. Next slide, please. And the last course of action is to construct alternative values and imaginaries. Generally, urban dilapidation is stigmatized to justify closure of a rand gap through gentrification. And in China, the displacement is also glamorized as once in a lifetime opportunity to become owners of housing and acquire upward class mobility. And to for an alternative imaginaries, we need to discredit the political rhetoric about rand gap capture. And next slide, please. So for the Chinese government, because it's a very strong government, so it can actually play a very important role in the processes making the rand gap untrue, because the government is the guarantor of the property rights, whose decision carry weights in the commodification, and is also major redistributive power to address the inequalities, and it's a key force at the nexus of financialization and collective decision making, and also is the initiators of alternative values and imaginaries. So we think the Chinese government is ideal subject for analysis because it has the potential to turn the abstract proposal of from the Eric to the concrete action and to make the rand gap theory untrue. Next slide, please. In fact, the Chinese government has been making attempts to make the rand gap theory untrue, maybe in the most of the time unintentionally. And we're going to use two case studies. And the first one is the macro-regeneration. And macro-regeneration is an incremental protective regeneration of inner city neighborhoods. And the government, in this redevelopment, the government just abolished destruction of urban fabrics and large-scale displacement. And it also relinquished the control of the rand gap just for more social equity. Next slide, please. And so we're gonna use a case study that is the Xiaoxihu block. Well, the black dot in the right-hand side picture represents the location of this block. This block is a dilapidated residential area with the rich architectural history dating back to the Ming Dynasty. And it features 7 historical streets and over 40 conventional courtyards. Next slide, please. And first, the government improved the communal environments and created a more public space. We can see the alley in the left picture before the redevelopment actually is very narrow and run down. During the redevelopment, the government purchased properties and selectively demolished buildings to expand alleys and public spaces. So after the renovation, we can see the alley, the wall of the courtyard was demolished, and a public library was established, and the street lights were installed, and the public space were expanded. And this measure construct new imaginaries of the growth machine of the Chinese government. Next slide, please. And also, the government tries to decommodify the communal environments and the public space by subsidization. And the courtyard in the picture below actually belonged to a local resident named Mr. Liu. Actually, during the redevelopment, Mr. Liu received subsidies and design support from the government to redesign and renovate the courtyard so that his family privacies was protected while still providing conventional access for the visitors. So actually, we can see the tourists can visit this courtyard for free, and the wall was specially designed. So even the tourists outside can see the flowers inside the courtyard, just for the because it's a public space. Next slide, please. And the government encouraged the original residents to stay put in the macro regeneration. Well, there were 810 households totally in the block, and after the redevelopment, 402 households they decided to move out, and these households were compensated for their housing. And the rest of 408 households, they were choose to stay, and they were also given financial and design support to improve the housing and communal environment. And in the redevelopment, this block was divided into 127 smaller units to respond to the changing needs of the residents. And the government even rehabilitated the acquired buildings for tenants who preferred to stay without a huge rent increase. And this measure aims to achieve the socioeconomic equality. Next slide, please. And the government also tried to protect the urban fabrics, and most buildings inside the blocks were protected and repaired in this macro regeneration. And previous residential housing were normally overly crowded and they had to share a kitchen and bathroom. So for the sake of the use, and the government permitted the building extensions with a 10% discount on the land use charge. So that is 15 to 20% additional area for housing that is smaller than 45 square meters, and 10 to 15% for housing between 45 and 60 square meters, and less than 10% for housing larger than 60 square meters. And for those families whose housing were considered dangerous to live, and they can receive the subsidies from the government. So these measures aim to emphasize the use value of the properties instead of the exchange value. Next slide, please. And although the government just endeavored to redress the socioeconomic inequality, and to eliminate the mechanisms generating the rent gap, but we still think the macro regeneration failed to make the rent gap theory untrue. This is because this project is not financially viable, because the macro regeneration requires substantial government funds and government subsidies without sufficient revenues. And there were 53 macro regeneration projects in just one district of Nanjing to be launched. And its total area is as large as 200 Xiaoxihu block. And these projects are heavy financial burdens without debt financing. And in recent years, the Chinese central government has taken strict measures to prevent the expansion of the local government debt. While a cross-locality subsidization program was proposed, and this program aims is that the monies from the lucrative real estate redevelopment or development elsewhere subsidize conservation and building rehabilitation in historical districts. According to our opinion, we still think this solution is not a perfect, because this solution still hinges on the commercial redevelopment of some part of the district, and so this commercial redevelopment can cause the gentrification and the social economic inequalities, and will cause a phenomenon that we call taking housing of the poor to help the poor. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yep, thank you. And the second case study that we're gonna discuss is the education-led gentrification. This gentrification is driven by the middle-class families who compete for quality elementary and middle school education resources concentrated in inner cities. And the map on the left, on the right-hand side, shows the distribution of the top schools in Nanjing City. And these schools, they're all concentrated in the CBD. And the Chinese government adopted a nearby school enrollment policy. That is, if the parents own 80 apartments within the catchment zone of a top school, and their kids can have the priority to access to the top schools. So next slide, please. Well, the Chinese parents always think the investment on the education is a hedge against the uncertainty in the future. And that's why the 8 apartments of the top schools are highly sought after and popular. And the 8 apartments always have a educational rent gap. That is the disparity between the inflated expected potential price and the current price. And because the consistent stocking of the educational rent gap, so the price of the 80 apartment is exorbitantly high, and the low income families, they were priced out of the top schools. So that'll cause the educational and intergenerational inequity. And the government aims to take measures counter this education-led gentrification and to hinder speculation of private capital in the education rent gap. Next slide, please. So the first measure is to create overlapping catchment zone, and the 80 apartments were included in catchment zones of several adjacent schools, not just one, and vice versa. And the acceptance of the children is randomly determined by a computer program. And this measure aims to decommodify the 80 apartment and to achieve the socioeconomic equality and to restore the use value centrality and to construct the new imaginaries of the growth machine. Next slide, please. However, this measure disrupted the 80 apartment market because well, after this measure, the parents got concerned that the quality education was diluted by this measure, and this will cause a price drop, significant price drop of the 80 apartment. So that's why the buyers and investors of existing 80 apartments boycotted the policy. And this policy was only piloted in a few places without top schools. So that means this measure is kind of like a meaningless. And also, this measure remains geographically bounded, and its proximity to a school is not completely irrelevant. It's just simply matters less. And the picture in the right-hand side is about the public outcry of the parents. Well, the Nanjing municipality used to plan to merge one top school with an average school, and this plan immediately generated the public outcry. These parents just got concerned of the dilution of the quality education. And the banner in this picture reads strongly opposition against the forcefully amalgamation of the top school. Next slide, please. And the second measure to counter the education-led gentrification is the teacher rotation. The government stipulates that outstanding teachers and principals are required to regularly work in different schools for promotion. And this measure is to reduce educational disparity by exchanging experienced teaching staff. Next slide, please. Well, the rotating teachers within a wider area also has its disadvantages. The first thing is it reduces the quality time of the teachers with the family and increases the commuting time and costs. And the other thing is the exchanging teacher staff need to adapt their teaching strategies to different students' needs and collaborating with new colleagues. And so that's why the teachers actually are not very happy about this measure. And so that's why it's not so effective. It's not so welcomed. And the parents, at the same time, didn't buy it too, because the parents choose to purchase 8 apartments just because of the school's reputation, not the teachers in rotation. Next slide, please. So based on the previous analysis, we think the government's policy countering education-led gentrification failed to make the rent gap theory untrue. And there is another very important reason for this. It's because the filtering mechanisms adopted by the central government. In recent years, there is the rapid expansion of higher education caused an oversupply of academically oriented university graduates and a short supply of the skilled workers. So the central government adopted a filtering mechanism that is forcefully direct approximately half of the students into vocational high schools for future skilled workers, not academic high schools. Well, the problem is the vocational high schools was stigmatized, and the students in the vocational high schools were stigmatized as losers too. It's just because due to their poor training quality and limited opportunities for upward mobility. So the students in the vocational high schools, they just think their school is just a detour on the way to university education. And this stigmatization actually caused a panic in parents. And so that's why the scramble for the quality education. Next slide, please. And to address this problem, the central government claimed that they will support the vocational education with more money and societal recognition of the vocational school diplomas. But we think it's more or less policy rhetoric, because based on the national budget in 2022, we can see the budget for the academic education is way more than the vocational education at the high school and the university levels. So next slide, please. So unless the government just give more support on the vocational education and remove the stigma on vocational schools and students, it is really hard to eliminate the mechanisms which serve to generate the educational rent gap. So that's why we think the policy countering education-led gentrification failed to make the rent gap theory untrue. Next slide, please. And here are some conclusions. In this research, we just used the 2 case studies to show how to make rent gap theory untrue. The first is micro-regeneration, in which the government just relinquished the control of the rent gap. And the second is the countering education-led gentrification, where the government tried to hinder the speculation of private capital in educational rent gap. And we believe that both mitigate social injustice in some extent, but they failed to make the rent gap theory untrue. This is because they failed to eliminate the mechanisms which serve to generate the rent gap. And these are just more or less ad hoc measures, and they're difficult to scale up. Next slide, please. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very interesting talk. We finished well in time. We have plenty of time for discussion. Ernesto, do you want to go first?
Okay, I would like to thank Cheng for this excellent presentation. Well, my reflections are very simple. I think this is precisely what the rank gap theory was meant for, to produce more equality in the land value and land rent distribution. And I think this is precisely what the Chinese government is trying to do. I think of the 10, 12 papers we had in the special issue, this is the one which is more focused on policies and actual redistribution measures. So I very much applaud that and welcome it. And I think this is precisely what the rank gap theory was meant for. But what this paper makes me reflect is that on the one hand, we had the market profit-oriented redevelopment in most of the cities of the world, which creates large-scale displacement, huge inequalities. And on the other hand, we had this state performed, state-regulated redevelopment seen here in two cases, and which creates micro inequalities. So which one is better? I think, in my views, humbly, I would prefer this state managed rank gap management, which is not absent of problems, as I see. These conflicts and micro conflicts of micro displacement and all these problems of regulations of the educational system attached, linked to the housing markets are very obvious and are new for most of the cities elsewhere outside China. So I would like to ask Cheng if you could expand more about the actors and agents that manage, especially the state agents. How is the governance of these two cases? Who makes the decision? Especially in the first one, is it local powers, borough level powers, or is more like a national oriented policy? Is it just in the city of Nanjing, or maybe it is being applied in other cities? What is the feasibility of projecting and bringing these policies further for the future? Where is China's state urban regeneration, redistributional, rank gap oriented policy going to in the future? So this is a very simple question, but maybe it deserves a more complicated, more complex answer. Anyway, I'm very happy with this work, and I really think it teaches us possible futures for the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for a question. I think this a very good question. I would say it's $1 million question. It's very challenging to answer it while I will try my best. So I think you're talking about the hierarchy of the power. Is when they're making such kind of when the government try to make a decision to counter the ramifications of the rank gap. So actually, it involves not just the local government. Actually, it's the whole chain of commands. So from the central to the local. So for the micro-regeneration case, well, the central government just encourage the local government to call a halt to the commercial redevelopment and encourage the micro-regeneration and those kind of stuff. So what the local government is doing is just to follow the central government's order, but the local government actually is the one who are implementing the policy and who are financially subsidize or support this program, because although the central government said probably they're gonna have some kind of like special debt to support the some kind of like redevelopment, but it's just not all of these projects. So especially for the micro-regeneration in Xiaoxihu block, is completely subsidized by the local government. And so that means the local government played a very important role in this process. For the second, that is the education-led gentrification. The government actually is not the beneficiary of the education-led gentrification because it's just caused by the speculative middle-class parents. So the government tries to stop this kind of a thing. And so the local government is following the order of the central government, that is to stop the kind of speculation of the 80 apartments. And that's the same logic, just as the macro-regeneration, the previous one. But in this case, the local government actually can do can do very little things to stop the education-led gentrification. Is because the most important reason for the scrambling for the quality education is because the filtering mechanism adopted by the central government, and the central government just want to forcefully direct a part of the middle school graduates into the vocational high schools. So that caused the panic among the parents. Unless the central government change this kind of policy, the local government can just can do nothing about it. All they can do is just to rotate the teachers or to merge the different catchment zones of the apartments, or to do something like that. But you know that won't change. That won't solve the problem completely. That's just the central government still got the hand, still got the crucial part of this problem.
Does that answer your question, Nestor?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. I was waiting for the rest of interventions, if there are any.
Yeah, well, I actually contributed partly to this article, so I didn't want to ask a question first, but I do have kind of additional questions following up from your talk today, especially the kind of discussion surrounding the kind of education-led departments, and then somehow we are discussing one of the main reasons behind this is because of this co-filtering mechanism, which somehow force half the middle school graduates into vocational schools. Then it seems logical if these kind of more resources somehow directed to vocational training, or to somehow challenge the kind of stigma. But then the other option would be, okay, expanding this kind of university enrollment, which has already taken place in China, right? The expansion, the massification of higher education, this kind of university education. I think the competition doesn't stop at the university level either, because the postgraduate entrance now has been expanded again in China as well. And lots of the university graduates now competing for quality postgraduate programs. So this is a purely speculative. Like, do you think that kind of expansion, university education expansion, might as well somehow contribute to cool down the speculation of the housing market? And do you see an end for this kind of competition for quality education resources in China at all?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's a very good question. as you said, it's very kind of like a speculative thing, because we at this moment we didn't do any kind of empirical and quantitative analysis based on this. But I guess maybe you're right. The expansion enrollment of the universities can somehow cool down uh, uh, the scrambling or the competition for quality education in the on the elementary and middle school level. But that won't completely solve this problem. It's because the government has issued this policy that part of the students has to be directed to the vocational school, and this vocational school was highly stigmatized. So that means we still got this kind of enrollment pressure, unless you got the top, unless you go to the top schools, and your kids still got the risk that are gonna enter into the stigmatized vocational school, and that'll cause the education-led rent gap, and cause the education-led gentrification. Yep.
I have an additional question. I don't see any question from the audience yet, so I'll just abuse my position here. And about the kind of micro-regeneration, I mean, the current readings in the literature about this particular practice somehow seem to be polarized. There are a lot of people, urbanist planners, the quite positive about this emergence of the micro-regeneration practices. It doesn't displace any people. It directs funding from the government, from private sectors to those neighborhoods in need of upgrading. But then on the other hand, there are also people who are highly critical of this because, well, like you already mentioned that it is not financially viable, and sometimes it involves the displacement occurring in other places.
Yep.
So I'm just like curious, like moving beyond this specific case in Shaoxihu, do you see any kind of successful examples at all in Nanjing or even in other places in China? Or what would you suggest to somehow make the rank gap theory untrue if the Chinese government is very interested in that direction?
Okay, thank you for the second question. Well, when we're talking about the successful example, actually there are a lot of criteria to define success. Well, when we say like when we're talking about like just displacement and socioeconomic inequality and those kind of traditional ramifications caused by the gentrification, I think actually Shaoxihu block is a very successful example, because it just has no displacement. I mean, although there are some people choose to leave, but it's just a voluntarily resettlement. It's not a coercive displacement, and there's I think the government just balanced the needs of different stakeholders, and try to achieve the socioeconomic equalities. But the thing is, this mode is hard to scale up, because this program needs to heavily subsidized by the government. So from this aspect, we would say, well, maybe this is not a successful example. So it depends what kind of criteria we're using. And talking about this, I think I just read a newspaper, a news report about the self-subsidized redevelopment. It's just well, because the government cannot subsidize all of these redevelopment all over the city, and so maybe the most financially viable redevelopment solution is to just pay for the cost for all the redevelopment of your own house. And well, it's still I don't know whether it is the final solution for to make rent gap theory untrue, but I think maybe this is a hopeful. But although this solution is very prospective, but it still is has its disadvantages. It's like it's really hard to achieve an agreement between all the stakeholders, and takes a very long time. And the property owners, they're not qualified to design or redesign to rebuild the whole community, the whole block. So I think maybe we still need more time to decide whether what will happen in the future. I think this is still up in the air.
Thank you. Let me see if we have any questions from the audience.
If we don't, I would like to raise more questions.
Yes,
The first one is about the second policy that you observe, and that is like balancing the quality of amenities. It is everywhere that happens that gentrification is attracted by a number of amenities, and as gentrification happens and rent gap exploitation happens, more amenities come due to the higher payment capacity that the new agents, residents, users, and so on, to use Eddie Clark's jargon. They can pay more, and they attract and they produce and they stimulate more amenities. But what the Chinese government does with this attempt to equalize the quality of the schools by rotating teachers, I mean, that's something really interesting in terms of the huge attraction that schools have in the Chinese housing and land market, and the huge intervention that schools can promote and can do in the land and housing market. So that's something to reflect about, I think. There are many authors speaking about the catchment zones and its effect on gentrification, but from the perspective of the land market and the workings of the system of value production and rent gap production, that's a huge question that comes to my mind, and that's very new, I think, in terms of discussions and theorizations on land rent in the cities. And my second question is about the first policy, and it is unavoidable for me to relate it to land value capture policies being exerted in the United States, in England, in Latin America, and Singapore and Hong Kong, but more market-oriented context. But in those cases, what would the state do? The state would allow these devalued properties to go down and down. So they would stimulate the purchase of these devalued properties by developers in order to raise the potential ground rent and capture that super high rent. What would the state do then? It would take part of it as land value capture, and the state would redistribute it in different welfare policies. So that's one way. But the Chinese government is doing something different. It's preventing those devalued properties to go down, and rather than that, increasing the capitalized ground rent, increasing. So it's making, as you say, I mean, I'm not saying nothing new. This is what you say in your paper. It's making more difficult the rent gap to be captured, because the capitalized ground rent it's higher due to these micro improvements in the properties. So I think comparing these two models and seeing how successful and especially how socially just they are and how effective they are in avoiding displacement, I think it's that maybe it's something, an outcome from your work, and maybe a possible further analysis that you could do in order to bring this Chinese policy of micro regeneration that you observe in the first place, to bring it into a broader analysis. I don't know if my reflections make sense, you too, but I think I'm precisely now working in a project of land value capture with people in the United States, and we never see nothing like this. It's just taking some money from developers, business as usual, capturing part of the value, and then redistributing. So it doesn't change the system really. But what the Chinese government is doing, it changes the system. It's more profound, I think. So that's my very long question. I apologize for this very long question, but your work is really intriguing and it really motivates more reflections. Thank you.
Thank you. And oh well, can I say something based on Ernesto's comments? And yeah,
Of course.
Oh well, I really appreciate your comments, and I think you just reminded me one thing. Well, because you said the rotating teachers and the macro regenerations and those kind of things are pretty new in your perspective. But it's because maybe I just lived in this country, so I kind of like get used to it as sort of like take it for granted. Well, because I think what you said maybe it's reminds me of something else. Well, in the recently I've always kind of like on a retrospect, I based on this paper, I was like am I too critical to the government's intervention, the state intervention against the rent gap? Well, because we can see actually the government actually took a lot of measures to redress the social economic inequality, although they're not perfect. But maybe there ain't no perfect policy in the world. So that's what we need is just the lesser of two evils. So maybe we shouldn't. Well, maybe we shouldn't be too critical. But the thing, the other thing is comes to my mind is Tom Slater used to write another paper that is the eviction of the critical perspective of the rand gap. So I'm sort of like in a conflict state. It's sort of in a dilemma. I'm sort of like, am I too critical or am I just not critical enough? So
that's precisely why I'm saying that these policies maybe need to be compared with the policies in the West.
Yeah, you're right.
So-called redistributional policies.
Yeah, your comments make sense. Maybe we should just put the Chinese the policies with the side by side with the Western policies, so we can tell the difference, not just from one perspective, but from a comparative perspective. Maybe that's the for the research in the future. Thank you.
If you want to compare with Latin American policies, which are very, very active in trying to do land value capture, like in Colombia or Brazil, I'm very happy to assist you with that. So
I think that's I see
a comparative. I see a comparative attempt.
Yeah.
Possible.
Yeah. Thank you.